start Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. It's the second wide line, V'shavin. V'shavin, and everyone agrees, Shein Lashon Ha'Se'isa B'Peishin, that you're not supposed to make the dough with lukewarm water. This was a machlekes in the Brisa where we had Rabbi Akiva saying that he stayed with Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua, and he made the dough with wine and oil and honey. They said it was fine. Was that the Brisa? Yeah. And then they concluded, everyone holds that you can't make it with lukewarm water. Okay. So we're going to explain this. What's the difference between this and menachos? By menachos, a mincha has bread also that's baked in the oven, and they use water, of course, to make the dough. And over there it says, the Tanan, it was taught in the Mishnah, it's also brought as matzah. It's not chametz, but nevertheless, it's lukewarm water. It's a shloyich mitzvah. They're careful that it shouldn't become chametz. What are you telling me that you can't make matzah for Pesach with lukewarm water in the dough? By menachos, it's not a problem. So the Gemara answers, Imamru bezrizin, Yamrishem bezrizin. How can you compare what's going on in the Beis Hamikdash to people's houses? The Beis Hamikdash, they're kayanim. They're careful to make sure that it doesn't become chametz. So by a carbon mincha, there's individuals there that know what they're doing. They're kayanim. But to tell every person, every homeowner that baked their own matzah, it wasn't like a matzah bakeries. Everyone did it in their house. So Yamri B'Shenj isn't going to say that everyone should do this. This is risky business. If that's the case, miltas nami lasis. So why by the menachos, if you're so sure that these are experts, why by the menachos don't you allow them to soak the grains, to be able to get the husks off, to make it the flour clean? They could soak the grains also if they're such experts. You can't soak the grains first. The Gemara says, Lisha bizrizin isa, lessa bizrizin. When it comes to the kneading of the dough, you use warm water because the kayanim are the ones that are doing it. But the making of the flour and the preparing the flour, that's not done by the kayanim. That's done by the owner of the korban that does this before he gets to the Beis Hamikdash. Well, actually, not before he gets to the Beis Hamikdash, but he does this. He's the one that does this. It's a zar. The Gemara says, "V'lishim yisa bezrizin." What are you telling me? Actually, no. The making of the flour he does before the Beis Hamikdash, before he gets to the Beis Hamikdash. The grinding was all done before. The question here is, but what about the kneading? You're telling me that the kayanim are kneading it? Even the kneading of it is done by other people other than the kayanim. The owners are allowed to do the kneading. It's only the kmitza that is where the mitzvah's kahuna starts, just like by the sprinkling of the blood by a regular korban. And the shechita we said was ksher bizar. So too, the kneading of the dough is ksher bizar. That could be the owner, and shows up the kayin and he does the kmitza. So you're telling me that the mixing of the flour is done by the kayin? No, it's not. It could be by the owner. The Gemara says, Lisha, when it comes to the kneading, I understand that the kayanim don't do it, but it's in the home of the kayanim. It's in the Beis Hamikdash. It's b'makam's reason. They're there, they're standing, they're watching. You have to do it carefully. A zar, a stranger, kayanim's reason. That's the rule. Kayanim's reason. Yeah. Yeah. So the mixing of the dough could be done by a zar, but it needs to be in the makom of zrizim. It needs to be in the azara. If it's outside the azara, then it's psula. This excludes the soaking of the grains to get off the husks. That's not done in the Beis Hamikdash at all. not by the Koyanim, and it's not in the place of the Koyanim. The Gemara says, what's the difference regarding the Aimer? Aimer was brought on the second day of Pesach, the barley. The Tanya started in a Brisa. No, it was barley. Still, I guess it wasn't chametz. It was just the grains, right? No, it was toasted. It was toasted grains. They toasted the grains. What did they do with it afterwards? Did they turn it into a bread? It says lysis and so they would soak it and then they would drain it. They would put it together and let the water drip out. So why were they allowed to do it over there? So it says tzibah shiny. Over there it was done for the community. And it was done al pi bezdin. So that's a different story. It's not like an individual that's bringing his carbon that's going to do whatever he wants and how he's going to drain it. But there they had to be careful. The bezdin was watching what they were doing. Tana Rabbanan started in the Brisa. Okay, in order to understand this, we have to just mention one thing we mentioned yesterday, that there was a machlekes Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva regarding matzah from Meiser Sheni. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says lechem ayni, which means only something that could be eaten ba'aninas, and Meiser Sheni, which is brought to Yerushalayim, is not allowed to be eaten ba'aninas, so you can't use Meiser Sheni flour for your matzah. And Rabbi Akiva said matzah's riba. You are allowed to. What does he do with ayni? He says ani or whatever. Yes, a different. A different limit. Okay, now we have this following brisa. Tana Rabbanon started in the brisa. Maybe a person can fulfill his obligation, a kayan probably, with flour that was brought to him by the gifts of the bikurim. All the farmers bring their bikurim to the kayan, and he receives these bikurim, and now he has grains, because it would bring from the 7 species. He has grains, and maybe he could fulfill his mitzvah with this matzah that he received as gifts. No, not Meiser Sheni. Differently. I'm using Meiser Sheni. That was a comparison because we're going to have the same machlekes. Talmud Leimer. So the Brisa says, in all your dwelling places, you eat matzahs, there's a restriction on bikurim. It needs to be eaten in Yerushalayim. Matzah is not supposed to have any restriction. In all your dwelling places, you eat matzah. You can't use bikurim, the grain of bikurim, for matzah. The Rabbi Yossi Aglili. That's the word to Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, by the way, is like a Talmud Chaver of Rabbi Akiva. Considered some places a student, some places he's considered a contemporary. Rabbi Akiva says, matzah umarer. It says in the pasuk matzah umarer, ma marer she'inei bikurim, just like marer can't be bikurim because bikurim is only the 7 species. And marer is, I don't know what you even use, lettuce or horseradish, whatever it is not one of the 7 species. Af matzah she'inei bikurim, matzah, they both agree. It's just the question is on the limit. Yeah, before by Meiser Sheni they didn't agree. Here they're agreeing that you can't. The question is the source. So the Gemara says that what's Rabbi Akiva's source? Akiva's source is that it needs to be similar to Mara. Mara is not bikurim, and so matzah is also not bikurim. The Gemara says 1 second. Mara shein b'mina bikurim. Let's take this one step further. Marar isn't bikurim at all. It's not bikurim. Even its species can't be bikurim. Maybe that's a restriction on matzah, that you can't use matzah from anything that its species is bikurim. I understand you can't even use. Of course, you can't use the wheat or barley itself. That's from the 7 species, 7 types that Israel is blessed with. I understand you can't use wheat and barley, but let's say the Gemara is suggesting you can't use any wheat or any barley, because you can't use anything that could be bikurim. It has to be similar to mara. Mara is, even its whole type is not bikurim. You'll have to make your matzah out of spelt or rye or oats, but not wheat and barley, because those two are bikurim species. Talmud Leimer matzis riba says no. Matzis. It has an extra word, and that's telling me that it's including matzah. It's including the wheat and barley that you can use them for matzah. Matzis riba feel bikurim nami. Maybe it's coming to tell me that you can use bikurim themselves, the actual gift that was given. Maybe you could use those. So how did Rabbi Kiva retracted? And what does he learn? He learns like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, that Rabbi Yossi Aglili says we learn from Chomesh V'Seichem that only what could be eaten in all your dwelling places and bikurim is only eaten in Yerushalayim. So yes, he agrees he can't use bikurim, but the source is because of the restriction on bikurim that where it could be eaten. Tanya, how do we know Rabbi Kiva retracted? It goes like this. There's a brisa that says maybe a person could fulfill his mitzvah of matzah by making matzah out of bikurim. Matzah ne'acheles b'chomesh v'seichem yotze bikurim she'en ne'achelim b'chomesh Shabbos el b'Yerushalayim. Exactly the limit of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. You can't use bikurim because matzah has to be eaten in all your dwelling places, and bikurim is restricted to Yerushalayim. Maybe I also exclude Ma'aser Sheni from matzah. Talmud Leimer matzis riba. No, Ma'aser Sheni is acceptable. That means the grain, the second tithe that was brought to Yerushalayim, that you are allowed to use, but you're not allowed to use bikurim. Both of them have the same restriction. Once you bring them to Yerushalayim, they're stuck in Yerushalayim. Well, bikurim is designated from beforehand. The Ma'aser Sheni is designated beforehand, but the Ma'aser Sheni you could redeem. But bikurim and Ma'aser Sheni, once they're brought to Yerushalayim, they're stuck. And with b'chomesh v'seichem, you have to be able to eat it anywhere. Why are you saying that Ma'aser Sheni is acceptable? So the Gemara explains, the Brisa explains, Ma'aser Sheni sheish leihat b'chomesh Shabbos. Ma'aser Sheni has a way out. Usually it has a way out only before it's brought to Yerushalayim. What's the way out? You redeem it on coins, and then you eat the grains, you eat the food. Kid Rabbi Lazar. Says Rabbi Lazar. And I only exclude bikurim because that doesn't have a heter. Rabbi Lazar says, very interesting. Usually you can't redeem Ma'aser Sheni in Yerushalayim. The redemption of Ma'aser Sheni is to get it to Yerushalayim. You get the money to Yerushalayim, and in Yerushalayim you spend the money. Once that happens, you can't do any redemption. But Rabbi Lazar says, yes, you can. If the Ma'aser Sheni becomes tamei and you're not allowed to eat it, so then you redeem it, even in Yerushalayim. And then once it's redeemed, then it becomes regular chulin, and then you buy new Ma'aser Sheni. So if that's the case, so this Ma'aser Sheni has a potential possibility of being eaten anywhere. So Ma'aser Sheni is acceptable for matzah because of b'chomesh v'seichem, but bikurim not. How do you know Ma'aser Sheni is paidinais b'Yerushalayim? Talmud Leimer ki leisuchal seisei, because you can't carry it. The pasuk says, and ve'in seisei la'achila, and then it says that you can't carry it. That was a reason for redemption, but you can't eat it is also a reason for redemption. Why can't you eat it? Because it became tamei. Shenemar, how do you know seis means eating it? Vayisa masis meispanov. So partially ago, that they took the gifts, the food that they got from Yosef, the brothers took it. So masis means the eating, the food. Man shamat leidamer Ma'aser Sheni nafit bei. Who's the opinion that holds that you can use Ma'aser Sheni for matzah? Rabbi Akiva. Become a mayat l'bikurim b'chomesh v'seichem. It's Rabbi Akiva that holds that Ma'aser Sheni is acceptable. Rabbi Yossi Aglili didn't accept Ma'aser Sheni for matzah. Rabbi Akiva does accept it. What's the source that bikurim is not accepted? B'chomesh v'seichem, Rabbi Yossi Aglili's source. You see very clearly. You see very clearly that Rabbi Akiva retracted from his limud of learning marar and matzah, that juxtaposition of the two words to tell me that just like marar isn't bikurim, so to matzah isn't bikurim. That's not the source. The source is b'chomesh v'seichem, that the matzah needs to be eaten anywhere, and therefore bikurim can't be eaten anywhere. You can't use bikurim for matzah. Shema Mina Hadabre. We see clearly that Rabbi Kiva retracted and uses Rabbi Yossi Aglili's source. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Tepak Leimi Lechem Aini. If you go back to yesterday's piece, and that's what we're dealing with here, Ma'aser Sheni. The Ma'aser Sheni can't be used for matzah. Where does, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, where does he get that from? He gets it from Lechem Aini. And Ma'aser Sheni is not allowed to be eaten by Aninas. Aninas means the first day of mourning, before the body is buried. So, and matzah is called lechem aini, which we're translating that it could be eaten by aninas. Now the problem is that bikurim is also not eaten by aninas. So why do I need a special pasuk of b'chomesh v'seichem to tell me not bikurim? The same pasuk that he used for Ma'aser Sheni would also tell me not bikurim. Rabbi Yossi Aglili. It says by bikurim that it needs to be eaten with joy. The Gemara answers, Savalak Reb Shimon. He holds like the other, like a different opinion regarding bikurim. The opinion of Reb Shimon, it's Reb Shimon by Yochai, that holds the Tanya bikurim is surim leinen. The Tanakama holds, yes, correct, that bikurim is not eaten by an einen, but someone in mourning, he's not in a state of happiness. Reb Shimon Mater, Reb Shimon says, yes, an einen is allowed to eat bikurim. So lechem aini wouldn't exclude bikurim. It only excludes Ma'aser Sheni, because Ma'aser Sheni, everyone agrees, can't be eaten by aninas in that state of mourning. But bikurim can be, according to Reb Shimon. And that's why he needs a separate pasuk for bikurim, that you can't use bikurim for matzah. My time of the Rabbanan. What's the explanation for the Rabbanan that say bikurim can't be eaten by aninas? And then we're going to go to Reb Shimon. It says, you shall not eat it in your gates. The master taught, what does it mean in this whole pasuk that says the word trumas yadecha? It says Eila bikurim. That's referring to bikurim. The iskash bikurim lemaisa, because bikurim is compared to maisa. Ma maiser asalainen, af bikurim asalainen. They use this comparison. Trumas yadecha, which is bikurim, is compared to maiser. You shouldn't eat it in your gates. It's talking about the maiser that needs to go to Yerushalayim. So, and there's a comparison there also to bikurim. So the same law that applies to maiser applies also to bikurim. Both of them can't be eaten by aninas. Rab Shimon, truma karina rachmana. You see, the Torah calls it truma. Kit truma, it's just like truma. We're talking about bikurim. Ma truma muteres lainen, af bikurim mutalainen. There's no restriction on truma to an einen. If a kayan loses a relative of a kayan passes away, he's still allowed to eat the truma, even though he's in a state of aninas, which is the first day of the morning of the avelas. So he's still allowed to eat the truma. So too bikurim, which is called truma. Oh, thank you. And you get to yourself. So, thank you. So, Reb Shimon says that bikurim is called truma. Truma is mutter to a kayan. Also, truma is mutter to a kayan. Truma is mutter to a kayan in a state of aninas. That's the point. So, to bikurim is mutter to a kayan in a state of aninas. For Reb Shimon, what does Reb Shimon hold? He doesn't have the comparison of Ma'aser Sheni to bikurim, that just like Ma'aser Sheni is forbidden to an einen, so to bikurim is forbidden to an einen. He doesn't hold of that. But simcha miya michtav ksiva, but it says that you have to eat it in happiness. You rejoice in all the good. That's for the bikurim. Gemara says, so that's not telling me that I have to be happy at the time when I'm eating bikurim. That tells me that you have to bring it in the time of happiness. When's the time of happiness? The Tanana was taught in the Mishnah, maybe b'koira. From Shavuos until Sukkot, that's the time of happiness. That's the time when you bring the Bikurim, you also read the passage that goes along with it, that says that we're brought to this land and all of that. Me'achag vad Chanukah, from Sukkot until Chanukah, maybe Veina Kaira. Then, I don't follow. So, from Sukkot to Chanukah, then you bring the Bikurim, but you don't read the passage, which means that there's a time of Simcha. What's the time of Simcha? Is when the time of you're harvesting the grain and you're gathering it into the house. That's the joyful time. That's when you have all the nice fruits, and you see the stockpile of grain. The happy time. So that's the best time for Bikurim. After that time, after Sukkot, yes, you can still bring it to Chanukah until Chanukah. You can still bring the Bikurim, but you don't read the portion along with it. After Chanukah, you can't even bring it anymore. You missed the chance. So what Reb Shimon is saying is that really Bikurim could be eaten in a state of aninus. If that's the case, then Rabbi Yossi Aglili doesn't have a source for matzah that it can't be Bikurim because of Lechem Aini. He needs a different source of the Chomesh B'Seicha. Ma'aser Sheni, he has a source of Lechem Aini that Ma'aser Sheni can't be eaten in aninus, and matzah is supposed to be able to be eaten by aninus. So that was Lechem Aini. But Bikurim, he has to learn from Chomesh B'Seicha because Bikurim is allowed to be eaten in a state of aninus. It says Simcha. He's following Reb Shimon's Shita, and it says Simcha. It says that's just telling me what time of year you bring it. Okay. We get into a discussion now, starting from here, about how bread is made. What type of bread is acceptable for matzah? What type is going to be chayiv and challah? Bread, as in the loaves. What type of loaves are acceptable for matzah, and what's going to be chayiv and challah? Big discussion, like bagels and different doughs and stuff. Okay, Taner Rabbanan. Starting in the Brisa Lechem Aini. It says a poor man's bread, or maybe it means a bread of response, or whatever it means. There's a whole discussion. However, prat l'chalot l'ashisha. This can't be boiled bread, and it can't be large cakes. Is it learning from the lechem, the word lechem, and it's not lechem if it's boiled? Maybe. And aini is probably poor and not these large loaves. Maybe it needs to be, maybe it looks like it's learning the whole thing from aini, from ani. Yeah, that was Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Akiva mentioned that ani means poor. Yeah. Why is it red aini? So he said that's shayna love to harbi, like Shmuel says. But Rabbi Akiva said that it can't be mixed with wine, and the dough can't be kneaded. Here we're learning it can't be boiled, and it can't be these very large loaves. Large loaves, they mean thick. I mean very thick. I mean very wide. It's not so clear what it's referring to. Can't be boiled. Maybe you need this dark bread, this black bread. It doesn't need to be like that. It could be the finest flour. It just has other limitations on it. It doesn't need to be these dark breads. I guess they would make it out of bran or something. Maybe it's referring to the rye, the old rye bread. It's black, the pumpernickel. In Cain, if that's the case, so my Talmud lechem aini. So why does it say lechem aini if you're allowed to make it the finest flour, like Shlomo HaMelech's flour? It says prat l'chal l'ashisha. The poor man's bread is coming to exclude that those two. You can't boil it and you can't be the large loaves. My mashma, the hayashisha lishon the chashivusa. Where do you get it from? That Ashisha means that it's very, very important. Because it says in the pasuk, it's talking after David HaMelech brings the Aron to its place. So he distributes food to everyone. He distributes to all the people, all the Jewish people that are there, from man to woman. For each person, chalas lechem achas, one loaf, v'ashper echad, one ashper, v'ashisha achas, and one ashisha. That means it's something significant. We're going to translate what these are in a moment. Rab Chanan Barabba says ashper. When he said one ashper, everyone gets, that's echad mishisha b'par, 1/6 of an ox. It's a huge portion. One's walking out with a big leg, Okay, it's more than a drumstick. Ashisha, what's the ashisha? What are they walking out with? Echad mishisha be'efa, 1/6 of an efa. The Omer was 1/10 of an efa. This is 1/6 of an efa, a large amount. Upliga de Shmuel, and this argues on Shmuel. Damar Shmuel ashisha garba de chamra. Shmuel said that this was actually a jug of wine. Those that love me, I guess, I get a jug of wine, or maybe like a jug of wine. Okay. Tanarabanan. It's taught in a brayse. Inay from Pas Ava. The Yom Tov for Pesach. The Yom Tov should probably not be there, as we're going to see in the Gemara later on. Here we're referring specifically to Pesach. Later on, it's going to discuss about the Yom Tov. You can't make thick bread on Pesach. Divri Beis Shammai. That's the words of Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel Matira. Beis Hillel says you are allowed to. Kama Pas Ava. How thick is thick? Amar Rav Huna Tefach. Rav Huna says we're talking about a Tefach. Because we find that the lechem apanim is a tefach. Now the lechem apanim is the showbread that was made every week. There were 12 loaves, and it's changed on Shabbos, and it was given to the kohanim to eat. The new ones, the old ones were taken out, and the new ones were put in there. However, it needed to be matzah, and it's because it's called lechem apanim. We have a Gemara in other places that says ein panim pchusim mitefach, that the face. There's no human face that's less than the tefach. I guess if you measure your face, it's a tefach. So that's the size of the lechem apanim, the thickness of it. So therefore, you can make matzah the size of a tefach. And Beis Shammai says no. Beis Hillel says yes. That's how thick a thick loaf is. Well, a shisha maybe is either thicker than that or bigger than that. Or maybe it's like Uncle Moshe challah. In his videos, he always pulls out this big loaf. Okay, they have by the weddings. Maskefler Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef has a question. Amru bezrizin, Yom Rishon is reason. Still is mater a tefach, but you're learning it from the kayanim and the lechem apanim. That's a very thick bread, a tefach. So maybe that size is only mutter for kayanim. Maybe that's not mutter for a regular person. A dough that's kneaded very, very well. Amela means like a lot of kneading goes into it. You're going to say this with a regular house where they just knead it regularly. By the Beis Hamikdash, they used very dry wood, which burnt very fast and which caught on very fast, give up a lot of heat. You're going to say that this is going to be the same halacha in an oven that hardly has the heat because the wood is still wet. You're talking about an oven that's very hot, and over there you can use a bread that's a tefach. You're going to say that you can also use it in a house where the oven doesn't get so hot. The Beis Hamikdash, they had a metal oven, cast iron. Over here you have earthenware. It doesn't get as hot. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Barabba says, Sheila says Rebbe b'yichud. I asked Rebbe I asked my teacher, either yichud either means clearly or privately. Umanu Rav, who's the teacher of Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba? Rav. We didn't say what his question was, or we'll get to that. Ikadami Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, Rav. Or some say Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba says in the name of Rav. Sheila says Rebbe b'yichud. I asked my teacher clearly or privately. Umanu, who is that? Rabbeinu HaKadosh. That's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. My pasava. What does it mean when it says in that brisa that you're not allowed to bake pasava, thick bread on Yom Tov? What is it referring to? Pas meruba. A lot of breads together. But my karle pasava. Why are you calling it pasava? Yishum de nefisha belisha. Because when you're kneading it, there's a lot of kneading that needs to take place. Rashi says that it doesn't have to do with chametz. It has to do with the effort. Because on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to work. You're only allowed to work for Yom Tov. If you're going to bake too much bread, that's already not for Yom Tov. That's what you do for you're baking for the whole week. It's talking about maybe it's matzahs, but whatever it is, it's not a din in chametz versus matzah. It's a din it's a din in Hilchos Yom Tov. If you want, you could say Ba'asri the Haitanel Pas Meruba Pas Avakarele. Or you could say that in this place, Pas Meruba, he calls it Pas Ava. That's just the translation. My time, go back to Beis Shammai. What was the reason that it was usher? What's the reason for Beis Shammai that you're not allowed to make pasaba? Maybe because, if it's because it's too much effort, and on Yom Tov you're only allowed to do what's necessary for Yom Tov, and here you're overdoing it, you're overworking. My year, if you go back, it says Einayim pasaba b'Pesach. It should have just said Yom Tov. Gemara says Einachanami. You're right. That Tana that was teaching it said that you can't make it today. It was on Pesach. He said you can't make it today, but he would have said the same thing on Sukkot and on Shavuos. But on Rosh Hashanah. Tanya Nami Yachav even have a brisa that supports this. Beishami Emrim in Eifin Pas Ava B'Yamtiv. Not Pesach. It says B'Yamtiv. Bisil Matir Bisil says you're allowed. Okay. Then Rabbanon, start in a brisa. Yotzim Pas Nikia. You can use white flour. It doesn't mean bleached. It means bran. It means not whole wheat, probably sifted, and the bran was removed. Badra means coarse flour. Ubesrikin amitziyarim bepesach, and which shapes bread that's shaped in figures. You're allowed to use them. Even though it says that you're not supposed to. What it means is, b'diavad, you're yotzer into a shape. Yeah. You know, they make birthday cakes with a picture on it nowadays. So those days they made the bread into figures. And, I guess like gingerbread. You would have the cookie cutters, you'd make shapes out of it. Houses and people. So you're not supposed to. There's a problem. People may spend too much time working on the shape, and meanwhile it's going to become chametz. You're not supposed to, but if you did, you're yotzer the matzah. Right. There's a concern you might get too much into the art. I'm Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda says, I don't remember him from other places, but he's famous for this question here. The Gemara has a phrase here that's used all over Shas. Baitis ben Zunin asks the Chachamim, Why are we not allowed to do this? Make these shaped loaves on Pesach? We'll see. We'll see in a moment. Because the woman that's baking the bread is going to spend too much time working on the shape. It's going to become chametz. He was into like a printing press. It says we can use a mold and we can do it quickly. Cookie cutters, the shapes. Amru, they said to him, Amrulai, Yomru kol asrikin asirim asrika baitas mutarin. It's not gonna work. They're gonna say that all shaped loaves are prohibited, but baitas's loaves are permissible because he has a mold that does it. And the Chachamim don't like to get into those nitty-gritty things. They like to say light plug. Let's just make one rule that covers everything. Otherwise, it gets complicated. Say this one yes, that one no. It's easier to have a clear cut. It's called light plug. Don't make the rules complicated. So, whenever in Shas it wants to say, but what if you do it like this and there's a way that you avoid that issue? It says, the expression is, Yomru kol asrikin asurin asriki baitos mutarin. It's an expression that says light plug. Don't make distinctions that are just, if it's forbidden, just leave it like that. Amar Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok says, if you remember, Reb Tzadok was the one that fasted 40 years. It says, Pamachas nechnasti achar Abba lebeis Rav Gamliel. When Rav Gamliel was carried out, no, it wasn't Rav Gamliel. It was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was carried out. He asked for three things. He asked for Yavna, he asked for the house of Rav Gamliel, and he asked for Reb Tzadok, doctors. So Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok says, one time I went with my father to the house of Rav Gamliel. They brought these loaves with the shapes. Amarti Abba, like Chachamim Chachamim, didn't the sages say loaves as in matzah loaves? Sorry, our matzah, we know matzah as thin and hard and crispy. That's not traditional matzah. Traditional matzah was soft and it was that's how it was. It's a recent thing. I don't know, last 100 years. Yeah, it's a new minute. That's the problem with getting it wet, because they did it. Now we bake it different. Now we bake it different. We do it quicker. In those days, they worked on it, and it was more of a, and they baked it differently. So, yeah. The Sfardim, I believe, still have soft matzah. Yeah, it's 18 minutes. That's the whole thing. Less than 18 minutes. It doesn't matter. Yeah, but we don't do it. We don't do that anymore. So anyway, he has. So I'm just telling you, don't catch me on the word loaves. It was loaves. They had loaves. So Amarti, Reb Tzadok says. Rabbi Elazar says to his father, Reb Tzadok, Abba, like Chacham Chacham, you're not allowed to make shaped loaves, matzahs. Amali b'ni. They said the baker, he has to make it in a way that's perfect. They have to put in the effort, every loaf, they have to make sure. That's a different story. But the house, they just make it quick and it's not a problem. It was the bakers that have the issue because they're trying to sell it. Ikadamri, the others say exactly the opposite. The bakers do it quickly. They know what they're doing. They have to make a lot. The homeowners, they sit over there and they make it. Okay. Whatever the case is, there's a problem. Either way, no. Whichever way you go. Amar Rabbi Yaisi, Eisen Striken, Kamin Rakikin, Venesin Striken, Kamin Gluskais. If you make the thin matzahs, then you can do it. But if you make them thick, it's a problem. Maybe. Right. Tanarabanan, it was taught in the Brisa, Sufganin. Sufganin must be loaves that are made like sponges somehow. Sponge cake. Vaduvshanim is this. Yeah. I don't know if it has any relationship to jelly or something. Vaduvshanin is there's honey in it. It's the iskritin is some other sort of thin dough that may have been baked on a hot fire. It's probably like a pastry dough or something. The chalas hambesaret, challah that's in loaves that are made in a frying pan. Ba'meduma, and if it's a mixture of truma and chulin, peturim and challah, all of these are exempt from challah. So we're talking about challah is what's the gift that's given to the kayan from the dough. 1 out of 24, 1 out of 48, or just a pinch today. All of these are exempt from challah. They're not real loaves. And the one that's meduma has a truma in it. We'll see why that's exempt. My challah tamasaret. What is this referring to? Masaret is made in a frying pan. Rabbi Shua ben Levi zecholot shal balabatim. This is when it's boiled. Okay. Rish Lakish says halalu maise ilfasein. All of these, the reason why they're not considered real loaves, they're not considered bread, and therefore they're exempt from challah, is because they're made in a pot. Bread is baked in an oven. All of these are made in a pot. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, maise ilfas chayavin. Made in a pot is still chayav. I forget, they have this, what is that? Is there a cake that they make on top of the oven? There's like a special pan that they put in there. I forget, they have like a circle or something. Yeah. And they could do it in the on the stove. You don't have to put it in the oven. So Rabbi Yochanan says, "My silfus is chayavin, v'alolo shasim bechama." These are made in the sun. That's why they're not loaves. Okay, so machlekes Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish about a pan. It's made in a pot if it's considered a loaf of bread. Rabbi Yochanan says yes. And it's only not considered bread if it's made in the sun. Meisvei, the Gemara has a question. The sponge, the honey, and the thin dough. Asan be'ilfis chayavin. If it's made in a pot, it's chayav. It's a raya to Rabbi Yochanan. Bechama pturin. But if it's made in the sun, it's exempt. To Yufta the Reb Shimon ben Lakish. It's a question on Rish Lakish. It says clearly, made in a pot is chayav. Rish Lakish said made in a pot is pata. Amarula, Amalach Reb Shimon ben Lakish. Ula says Rish Lakish can answer. What's he going to say? If you heat it up, and then you put the if it's hot at the time when you put the dough onto it, or onto the pan, maybe on the side of the pot, you stick it to the side, but it's very, very hot. So then that's going to be like an oven. But if you put it in the pan and then you turn on the fire and it starts to boil like as if you're making some sort of cholent over there, so then that's considered a stew. That's not considered a loaf. I remember one time there was a hurricane. We didn't have power. It was Erev Shabbos. I think it was Sukkot, before Sukkot. Ivan, I think it was Katrina or something. Anyway, I made the dough on the grill. So I just put a pan there, and you make it thin. You make like pizza. You put it on, and it puffs up like the pizza puffs up. Because if you make it very hot beforehand, that's so. This is hidbikal b'sefer then it's pata. The peturin. A second. I will hidbikal sefer tiach. The Gemara asked the question. I will hidbikal sefer tiach mai. But what's going to happen if you put it on into the pot and then you start to boil it? What's going to be the din? Hachanami the peturin. You're going to say that you're exempt. That's the suggestion here, that you're going to say exempt. Like Rish Lakish would say, the problem is adatani seifa. But if you read further, it says asam b'chama peturin, that if you make it in the sun, you're exempt. Liflik v'lisni b'dida. You should be familiar with this. Then why didn't you divide the original din into two dinim? If you're looking for a case of chayav and challah, in a case of pater, you don't have to jump to making it in the sun. You could divide this case itself. But it depends if the pan was heated first, if the pot was heated. When do we say that it's chayav and challah, That's only if the pot was heated, and then you put the dough in, and it puffs up like whatever it does. It bakes quickly. Aval hidbekol b'sefer tiach, but if you put it in and then you start to boil it up, piturin, that's not considered a bread. That's considered a stew, and then you're exempt. Why didn't you say that? Why do you have to say baking it in the sun? The Gemara answers, you're correct. The Bryce is actually missing words, and you read it the following. When do we say that it's chayiv and challah? That's if you heated up the pot and then you put the bread on. But if you put the dough into the pot and then you heated it up, that's like you made it in the sun. What was the story in the Bryce that says you made it in the sun? That was an explanation for if you put it in and heated it up afterwards. Tashema. Start in the Bryce. Yitzim b'matzah hina. B'matzah suya be'elfes. You yaitze with matzah hina. Hina means raw, like na. Or they say na. Don't eat it raw. Or b'matzah suya be'elfes. And you are yaitze with matzah that's raw, and you yaitze with matzah that's made in a pot. It's a kasha and Rish Lakish. The Gemara answers, this is the same story that we said before, that Rish Lakish would agree if you made it the pot very hot and you put the dough in afterwards. My matzah hina, what does it mean hina? It's raw, but if you pull it apart, you don't have the dough strings that are still attached. Amar Rava says, the same thing applies to the bread of the taida, which there were 40 loaves over there. Also, even if it's raw, it's doughy. But as long as when you pull it apart, the strings don't stretch, so then that's acceptable. The Gemara says, Pshita. It's the same din. It has to be bread. If it's not like that, then it's not bread. So I could have thought different. It says you should bring from it one loaf. He had 40 loaves. One loaf was given to the kohen that I think he puts on the mizbeach. It was given to the kohen. The other ones are eaten. It was given to the kohen. One loaf was given to the kohen. One loaf was given to the kohen. The others are eaten by the owner. The other 36 are eaten by the owner. Echad shleitel paras, and it says one. That means that it can't be broken. Maybe because it isn't baked perfectly, it's as if it's broken. It's not considered a real solid loaf because it's still a little bit raw. So kamashmulan that it's acceptable. Gemara has a question. Meisvei. Isa, the question over here is going to be in the whole discussion. It's going to take a moment until we get to the question. Isa is boiled dough. Bishamai paiter misil machayben. Bishamai says it's pater from challah, like bagels. I'm not sure if it means it's boiled only, like a knedel, or if it's baked and boiled. I'm not sure. We'll see in the Gemara that's going to say if it's baked, boiled and baked, and we'll see later. Whatever the case is, if it's boiled, Beishamai Paichin Bisil Machayven. Bisil says it's Chayev and Chala. Hechlita, if it's boiled, Beishamai Machayven and Bisil Paichin. Beishamai says Chayev, Bisil says Pater. Same thing. Boiled, and the mamish the opposite. Both the translation of boiled. It doesn't. What's going on? What's boiled and what's this type of boiled? What's that type of boiled? The Gemara explains kamach shal gabi magloshin. That's if you put the flour on top of the boiled water, you drop it in afterwards. The way you would make poached eggs or something. You drop it in after the water boiled. I think that's how you do it. Hechlita, what's the other way? Is magloshin shal gabi kamach. When you pour the hot water on top of the flour. What goes in first? Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yosi says in the name of his father Rabbi Yosi, both of them are pater from challah. And some say that both of them are chayiv. The Chacham say it depends. Asan be'ilfis, if it's made in a pot, pater, then you're exempt. Betaner, but if you make it in an oven, then it's chayiv. Now here's a problem. Asan be'ilfis is pater. If you make it in a pot, you're pater. Who holds that it's pater if you make it in a pot? Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan said ilfis was chayav. Is it going to be a kasha the opposite? Now it's going to be a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. However, before we get to that, first we have to explain what was going on here. The Tanakama, why did the Tanakama that quoted the Beisham and Beisil, why did they make a distinction between when you put the hot water in? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, V'chein Amar Rabbi Yehuda, V'teim Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, K'machlekes bezu, Kach machlekes bezu, V'tavra mishashon azu leishon azu. Actually, those are two different opinions. Both of them hold that there's no difference. There's a machlekes what Beis Shammai holds, there's a machlekes what Beis Hillel holds. There's a machlekes, what's the machlekes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? Which means that one opinion said Beis Shammai was strict and Beis Hillel was lenient. The other one said Beis Hillel was strict as an exception case and Beis Shammai was lenient. And those two statements before were collected from those two statements. And really, we're not dividing between Me'isa and Hechlita. That's not what we're doing. We're saying Me'isa and Hechlita is the same. And Beis Shammai is either strict or lenient, depends on which opinion you go like. We happen to take a sample of one opinion and we said, oh, that's Me'isa. We took a sample of the other opinion, we said that's Hechlita. Really, it was both the same. The one that says Beis Shammai is Machmer, it says it's Chayev, holds Me'isa and Hechlita is Chayev, but according to Beis Shammai. The one that says that Me'isa is Pater holds, according to Beis Shammai, is Me'isa and Hechlita is Pater. And you have to break it apart. Those are two different opinions. Okay, whatever the case is, and Betaner is Chayev, Tifta de Rabbi Yechon's question on Rabbi Yechonon says that if you made it in a pot, you're Chayev, and here we say you made it in a pot, you're Pater. Amalach Rabbi Yechonon Tanoi, Rabbi Yechonon says, Machlekes Tanam, the Tani was started in a Brisa, Yachal Yeh Me'isa Bechaluta Chayev Bechala. Maybe if it's boiled dough, you're chayiv and challah. Talmud lechem. No, it needs to be bread. You're exempt from challah. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, ein lechem ela afi betana. Bread is only if it's baked in an oven. Sounds like the same thing. Rabbi Yehuda Haina Tanakama, same opinion. You can't make it in a pot. You have to make it in the oven. Elalav ma'aseh ilfas ikabinayo. There's actually a difference between them regarding if it's made in a pot but without water. Tanakama savar ma'aseh ilfas chayavin. It's not boiled. Tanakama holds that ma'aseh ilfas is chayav. What was the issue over there? That was because you were boiling it. Rabbi Yehuda savar ma'aseh ilfas is patur. Rabbi Yehuda says no. If it's made in a pot, that's not good. It needs to be actually in the oven. The Gemara says, not necessarily. Is that correct? The Kuli Alma myself is paternity. Really, everyone holds that if it's made in a pot, you're actually exempt. We're talking about that you rebaked it. If you only made it you only boiled it, you have a knadle there, that's not considered bread, and you don't have to take challah from it. But if you then put it in the oven, then it becomes bread, and then you chayiv. It becomes like a bagel. It's not considered bread if it's not in an oven. Let me finish till the bottom of the page. Amar Rava, my time with the Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reason why Rabbi Yehuda says that once you boiled it, then it's never going to be bread? It says that 10 women will bake their bread in one oven. You have to bake it in one oven. Don't bake it twice. We're only counting one baking here. And if you do it in a pot, then it's finished. That's his opinion. Yosef Rava, Rav Yosef, Acher de Reb Zera. Rabba and Rabbi Yosef are sitting behind Reb Zera. Reb Yosef, Reb Zera, Kamei de Ula. And Reb Zera is sitting in front of Ula. So there's 2 rows of students, and there's Ula is teaching. So Amalei Rabba Reb Zera, so Rabba whispers over to Reb Zera, who's sitting in front of him. Ask Ula the following. If you put the bread inside the pot, but you heat a fire outside the pot, Mahu, Amalei, Mayemalei. Why should I say this? If I'm going to say this to him, Amalei, Hainio myself, that's a regular baking in a pot, which that's the machlokes. That was the old discussion. What are you bringing up a new case over here? That's the old discussion. Amalei Reb Yosef Reb Zera, so Reb Yosef leans over, says to Reb Zera, ask him the following. Ask Ula the following question. If you stick it inside, but you hold a torch to it. Amalei, why? What should I say this to him? If I'm going to say this to him, that's how everyone does it. All the poor people, they have to bake their bread. They can't make a fire and they have to put it very close to it. You have to put a torch through it, and that's how they bake it. So basically, he doesn't want to get into this old machlokes by asking this question in a new way. It's the same thing. Okay, let's leave it over here.